with sources, there are some reports about where John Harbaugh could go. Now, the Giants will save it for Gary, but there's this story coming out, Zach, of, well, wait a minute, what about Cleveland? Kev, what about Cleveland staying in the division? You would be an icon, a legend if you go there and win. Well, according to sources, I guess this was in ESPN Cleveland radio, John Harbaugh could have interest, but he has these demands, according to these sources. So, Zach, can we play that clip real quick?
League insider who speculates on what he's heard about Harbaugh's prerequisites to even be interested in your job.
Okay.
$20 million a year.
Not a problem.
Not a problem. $10 million assistant coach budget.
Not a problem.
Okay. Total authority over the roster. And also would like to select his own guy to lean on, personnel guy.
Okay, so would he be making the draft picks? Like, you're going to ask this guy? That kind of makes me feel uneasy. Does he want more say over the roster than what he had in Baltimore?
Yes.
Ooh.
Which would be a total change in the structure here. I think there are 4 definite candidates for Harbaugh to end up with. Cleveland now is, I think, 4th.
Okay.
Miami,
the Giants,
and Atlanta.
According to some sources, the speculation, these are the demands, Kev, of what John Harbaugh could want. Now, again, I'm sure that there is some truth that, hey, if I'm John Harbaugh, you want to get paid. You earn that bank. But for some of this, it's intriguing. But I think all of us can agree, Kev, and I'm curious, but I have a pretty good idea. If John were to take a job in Cleveland, he's going to want to feel like he can do it his way. And Cleveland's going to have to be able to oblige. If not, John's not going to waste his time, because Cleveland has been an organization that's been dysfunctional since they came back into the NFL when the Ravens came to Baltimore.
Yeah, there's been a lot of speculation about Harbaugh. And the whole salary stuff, that's kind of just like, that's not the big part of the story here. It's, to me, obviously, the control over the roster. And John Harbaugh clearly has favorites and clearly has guys that he likes. And, we know that John Harbaugh doghouse is very real too. But, for Cleveland, who already does have Andrew Berry, and they did not move on from Andrew Berry, you look at the Giants, who have Joe Shane and a bunch of other GM candidates already in there. It essentially becomes a Liam Cohen situation where you're going to fire a guy that you already have in your building to bring in this other coach that you really think can help you out. And I think the answer for some of these teams is yes, because it's not unprecedented anymore, where we've seen it. We saw it last year with Trent Baalke in Jacksonville, where, that whole situation and how that all turned out was Liam Cohen wanted his guy, or he didn't want Baalke. And Jacksonville said, all right, we like you more than we like him. And I think that in Miami, all indications, it felt like, all right, McDaniel's going to come back and they're going to do their thing. And he wasn't fired. He had a press conference. And then all of a sudden, John Harbaugh becomes available. And Miami says, hold that thought. And I'm not saying they fired him because of John Harbaugh, but I think that they certainly took into account who was available on the head coaching market. So it's interesting because, with Harbaugh, and again, I don't know how much influence he had in Baltimore. Eric Costa's the guy there, and he makes a lot of decisions there. But I'm sure, just like any other team, the head coach and the GM probably don't align on every single player, probably have different thoughts on different guys. And while, again, you're not going to probably have the same affinity for certain guys. I mean, that's the whole scouting and draft process, right? Like, you have scouts bang the table for guys, and the GM says, oh, well, all right, we're going to rock with you. Or, no, I'm going to make my own decision. So everybody has different feelings. But for John Harbaugh, if the reports are true, and again, there's so many different things out there about how he thought he was going to be able to run it back with his current staff, and Steve Bisciotti was
you actually
like,
can you confirm the reports right now, Kevin?
Can I confirm? I don't know.
Did you just confirm for everyone? Right?
No, I did
just
not.
Put on record that you're Kevin.
Man, I've broken news twice in my life, and I'm done with it. So no, I'm not breaking news right here. But if those reports are true, if they are true, then it doesn't shock me that Harbaugh would want control. Now, I don't know if a team would or would not give him that, but you're essentially hiring him for a coach GM role in that case. And that would probably demand a $15-20 million per year salary. So it's interesting for sure.
Yeah. Two things. One, I saw someone ask, I think it was Kieran, highest paid NFL coach right now is Andy Reid at $20 million. Harbaugh was at 17 last year, so he's looking for a little pay increase. But I want to ask you guys this. Are we sure these are John Harbaugh's requirements for him to be interested in a team? Or are these John Harbaugh's requirements to be interested in Cleveland? Because you look at their setup with Barry, like there's not been a lot of success. Is this, hey, I want control over the roster, I want control over this? Is he saying that? And I'll even say it's probably going to go for the Giants, because I don't know if you can really, they kind of saved it with Dart and Scattaboo, but the Giants have had their mistakes for sure. I just personally, I think it's going to be, if he trusts the front office that he's with, I think it's going to be less control. I think he trusted Eric DeCosta. I don't think he wanted full reins of the roster in Baltimore because he trusted EDC. That was his guy. If you're going to Cleveland and I'm John Harbaugh, I'm probably going to say, I'll come here, but I need a pay raise. I need $10 million so I can bring in my staff because I want the guys. I'm not just going on a budget here to put this together. John Harbaugh's saying these are my prerequisites if I'm coming to save your franchise. If maybe you got something like Miami, now the whole Tua thing and all of that, but they've got some things to work with. I don't know if that's for every team or if that's hey, if you want me to come to Cleveland, you're going to have to give me the promise or the deal that, hey, I got to have say over this roster. I don't think John's drafting anyone, but I don't think it's going to be John Harbaugh in the war room. He's at the head of the table. Everyone else is there. And, Andrew Barry is on the side and he's like, John's like, this is my draft. I don't think it's that. But I think he's going to be someone who, when he looks at the roster, he looks at free agents, he looks at other guys, he wants to bring in his guys.
I think at the end of the day, we talked about this. It's in baseball, it's in basketball, football, anything, life, business, take it across any corporation. Typically, if you're talking about people in positions of power, you do better when you're aligned on what you want, what your vision is. So if you are the NFL, it's a business. This is a business. You're making business decisions, and you are trying to make one of the two most important hires here for your team. If it's the GM and the head coach, you better make sure that those guys get along, because if they don't, then what the hell is going on? What are you trying to do? And I think for John, that's the big part here, is who does he want to be aligned with? And the owner's got to make that decision on how does he see fit. And I think that that's the part where, like Cleveland, that's a part that you're looking at right there. Would John feel aligned and feel comfortable going to Cleveland, who historically has had a lot of shit going on consistently? Giants, I know the last decades now has been a little bit murky, but before that, who are they aligned with? Well, at least on the head coach quarterback side, they had Coughlin and Eli Manning, won 2 Super Bowls. Mm-hmm. Their alignment, even from the front office down, was very solid. So I think that that's where I'm curious to see it all go. And I'm really curious when our guest comes on here, Gary Myers, because he's had the pulse. And guys, if you've been looking on X, he's been really reading in to the John Harbaugh situation here, because people are wondering, outside of the Giants or the Browns, where does he go? What else are the options here? Raiders, I think, Zach, you mentioned it earlier. That'd be a 3. Like, you have to make sure that you're okay with a full rebuild, and that's a hell no. That's a hell to the no.
Unless John Harbaugh is sitting there and he is obsessed with Fernando Mendoza. That is the only way, is if he genuinely sits there and he thinks that Fernando Mendoza is the guy that he can take under his wing for the next 10 years, and he's going to bank on that. Raiders makes no sense.
Yep.
Unless he goes there and part of his I want full control over the roster is sending Max Crosby to Baltimore as a parting gift. That would be cool. Then let's stamp it and get it done.
Sign and trade for Daniel Falele. There you go.
Oh, good. Good thinking, Kev. Good thinking, Kev. We'll add that in.
Yeah. Write that down. Write that down. You know, the teams to win now, right? Like at this exact moment, I think the Giants can turn it around pretty quickly. I think the Atlanta Falcons can turn it around just because you have arguably a top 5 wide receiver and running back in Bijan Robinson and Drake London. Quarterback situation's murky, but they got talent on the defensive side. But the Giants are very intriguing. The reason why I thought Gary could be an excellent person to talk to, well, guess what? He's got a great pulse on the New York Giants. And if you guys are looking back, he has a book specifically on the Giants called Once a Giant. So if we want to talk to someone about the New York Giants, John Harbaugh is the perfect time to do it. Ladies and gentlemen, let's bring on Gary Myers. Gary, you there?
I am here, Ryan. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing terrific. Thanks.
You have been reporting quite a bit about the interest the New York Giants have in John Harbaugh, and I've seen the tweets. Could you fill us in a little bit more on what you're hearing as it comes to the interest level and how things could heat up here? Because it does seem like there is the mutual interest for John Harbaugh to be the next coach of the New York Football Giants.
Yeah, I mean, the Giants have shown a tremendous amount of interest, staying in constant communication with John's representatives and, just waiting now to get their in-person meeting with him. I know they're going to start scheduling the meetings on Monday. Doesn't mean the first meeting is going to be Monday. They're going to start making a schedule of all the teams that would like to meet with him. I don't know if they're all going to come to Baltimore or John's going to make the trips to the individual cities, but he's probably going to have his choice on where he wants to go for the most part. Now, I'm prejudiced. I spent most of my life in New York, and there's something to be said for winning a championship in New York, and especially with such a historic franchise that it's been, down. Their last Super Bowl was the year before the Ravens won their second Super Bowl. But it's been pretty bleak. They've only made the playoffs twice since then, and the last 10 years they've had 1 or 2 good seasons, and won one playoff game basically since 2011, and coming off back-to-back seasons now where they've won a total of 7 games. So they need somebody who can come in and immediately change the culture, command respect in the locker room, give the organization credibility with the fans, and turn this thing around. They have a lot of good young talent, starting with a quarterback in Jackson Dart, who I really like. And so I think the Giants really have an excellent opportunity now to bring in John. And it depends if he likes the structure, and I don't think money will be an issue.
I don't think money's going to be an issue either. I think, John, there's a lot of different reports and what's going out there, right? And we do know one thing is if you're going to go to a new team, how much do you want to be linked with the quarterback that's at the helm? Now, Jackson Dart is a stud, and if you like him, it's a perfect opportunity. Talent on the offense with a franchise quarterback potentially. Defensive side, you have talent. You have a high pick in the draft. There's a lot to like there, and maybe we just had Todd Monken on yesterday, Gary, and we were texting time, and we can talk about that here in a second. But the other issue when we're hearing sources or things going out there was, would Harbaugh want his own GM? And I saw you tweet this out here earlier, so I'm going to pull it up on the screen. Oh, that's the wrong tweet that I had. Sorry, of course I do this on the wrong one. This is every time we can guarantee I'm going to mess something up here, Gary. That's just the way it goes. Let's see. I think this might be the winner. Let's try it again.
Yeah.
Right here. So you were saying that there's been some contention, I know, in the New York media as it comes to the current GM up there in New York. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on this tweet? Because this has been a very interesting conversation. I know Giants fans have had a lot of different feelings, especially how the last couple of years have gone. during this specific regime in New York?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's safe to say that Joe Shane is not the most popular guy in Giants Nation, if you want to call him that. He's whiffed on a lot of high draft picks. He let Saquon Barkley walk to Philadelphia as a free agent. Obviously, no compensation in return. Gave an outrageous contract to Daniel Jones that set the organization back a couple of years. Had the 5th and 7th pick in the draft a few years ago. Took Kayvon Thibodeau, who's just been okay, and Evan Neal, who has been unable to get on the field, and I'm sure he's not going to be back next year. So Giant fans are not happy with him. And when Brian Daboll got fired a couple months ago, they decided to keep Shane and put him in charge of organizing the information on a coaching search. And a lot of people took that to mean that over the last couple of months, Shane would just present to John Mara and Steve Tisch, the two owners, a list of potential coaches. And then depending on how the season played out, Shane himself could get fired. I never looked at it like that because that's not the Giants' way of doing things. They weren't going to have Shane do all this work and then the day after the season said, thanks, hand over your, manila folders and, leave your key to the washroom with the front desk. They don't do it like that. So I'm not surprised that Shane is still here. Now, if John Harbaugh comes in and meets with them and said, listen, I'd love to have this job, but I want my own GM, or Shane can stay, but I want to have more control over personnel, all that can potentially happen. But that's an unknown at this point. And I've seen so many people reporting that John refuses to work with Joe Shane. If the Giants don't fire Shane, they got no chance of getting him. I can tell you for certain, to this point, that conversation has not taken place with Harbaugh and the people closest to him. And it certainly hasn't taken place with the Giants because he hasn't spoken to the Giants yet. And his agent has not told that to the Giants. So people are surmising that because Shane's record is not so good and his public image is horrible among Giant fans, that no coach of John's stature is going to want to work with him. And that's just not true. It may wind up being true, but as we're sitting here right now, it's not true. And he did pick a quarterback in the draft. Now, I know Jackson Dart was Abel's guy, but that trade wouldn't have gotten made if Shane didn't want to do it. And Shane has said, that Dart was his guy too. I'm not sure exactly what the truth is on that one, but, when you make a good pick, everybody wants to lay claim to it. And when you bomb on a pick, it was the other guy's fault. So I'd say they both wanted him, and Shane pulled the trigger on it, but wouldn't have done it unless Daboll really wanted him. And they do have some good young players here. But again, somebody of John Harbaugh's stature might, if he has 3 or 4 opportunities, might be in a position to leverage and get who he wants and get the structure around him the way he wants it. I don't know Harbaugh to be that kind of guy that's going to walk in and want people to get fired without even knowing them. I don't know how you do something like that. Would Belichick do something like that? Absolutely. Would Parcells? Yeah. I don't know if John is that kind of guy.
Yeah, John has a great reputation through all of the football world, and it's been documented. And obviously, we mentioned that you authored Once a Giant, also authored Brady versus Belichick, the Dynasty Debate. So you're very well versed in this whole conversation. You've seen a lot of football throughout the years, and different coaches have different styles. Mm-hmm. But at least in John Harbaugh's case, I think he's very open-minded, but he's going to want to do things at least the way he thinks he can to have success. But Kevin, I think you had a follow-up question.
Yeah, I do. Gary, I'm curious because obviously John Harbaugh's the hottest head coaching candidate on the market. A lot of teams are lining up to potentially just even have a chance to get his services. But I'm curious if you have any information on it, or if you don't, I'm just curious to hear your opinion in general on specifically for the Giants, the why factor here. For any of these teams, the why factor. Is this for New York in specific? Do they trust his ability to lead men? Do they trust his ability to work with Jackson Dart and develop him? Do they trust the culture he built in Baltimore? If he does have, roster control somewhere or some say over the roster, do they trust his ability there? For John Harbaugh, I mean, he has a lot of great redeeming qualities. It's what made him stay in Baltimore for 18 seasons before ultimately getting let go. But for you, the fact that he's a big name and he's had the success, the Super Bowl, the playoff success early in his career, and all of that has made him into the coach he is today. But in your opinion or anything you've heard, what are kind of the things that these teams see in John Harbaugh that do make him the most popular choice to take over?
Well, specifically to the Giants, just think about the 4 coaches they've had since Tom Coughlin was let go after the 2015 season. Ben McAdoo, a first-time head coach. Pat Shurmur, who was 9-23 in 2 years in Cleveland. Somehow they felt he would do better with the Giants. You know what his record was in 2 years with the Giants? 9-23. Very consistent coach. Stays 2 years, 9-23, gets fired. Then Joe Judge, a special teams coach, like Harbaugh was, a special teams coach for the Patriots, who was way over his head, lasted 2 years. And then Dable, who made the playoffs in his first year and won Coach of the Year. And, the Giants thought they found their guy, and then they got progressively worse over the last 3 years. So they're looking for somebody that is established, that comes in with a tremendous amount of credibility, that they don't have to sell to their fans like this is an up-and-coming guy. We just got to grow with him. Giant fans have no patience for growing with a coach anymore. They want somebody that's going to step in, command the room immediately, and lend credibility back to the organization. Now, as far as Harbaugh is concerned, he's more of a CEO type. I've always gotten that impression. He delegates to his offense and defensive coordinator and his special teams coach. And then he runs the game management on Sundays or Mondays or Thursdays and sometimes Wednesdays, depending what time. Pretty soon it'll be Tuesday afternoons, But John is he's an organizer. He's a delegator. He's a great face of the franchise. And I think that's what's attractive for the Giants, considering what's been going on here for the better part of 10 years. They had a lot of success with Tom Coughlin. They won 2 Super Bowls with Tom. And, Tom was one of theirs because he had been an assistant here for 3 years, but then he went to Jacksonville and took an expansion team to 2 AFC championship games in the first 2, 3, 4 years, something like that. So they knew what they were getting in Coughlin. But he had never been a head coach in New York, and he was only a head coach in Jacksonville for a few years, where John has been a head coach for 18 years, and his track record is pretty well established. I think the only negative to Harbaugh really is how come he couldn't get to a Super Bowl with Lamar Jackson, who's been the most dynamic player in the league for a number of years now? Why do they always seem to be blowing leads in the playoffs or in big regular season games? Case in point, what happened in the season opener this year, which they really never seemed to recover from. I know they then had a bunch of injuries and got off to a horrible start, but the team didn't quit, coming back from 1-5, and within that missed field goal, I think under the circumstances, if Tyler Luke tried that field goal 100 times, on those, winning you're in, losing you go home, and how hard it is to kick field goals in that stadium, he would have missed it about 85 times out of 100. Because you saw what happened on the extra point on the previous series with Boswell, who's a really good kicker, who knows how to kick in that stadium, and he wasn't close on the extra point, so I wasn't surprised at all from 44 yards that Luke missed it. But just think how things might have been different if he hits that field goal. And I thought the Ravens were my preseason pick to win the Super Bowl. I really thought this was their year, and I'm not alone in that.
Yeah.
You're not, Gary. You're not alone with that.
I know.
We all did.
Yeah, and just think about if they had won that game in Pittsburgh after winning the game in Green Bay the week before, they would have played who at home this week?
Houston.
Right. Okay. So, I know they got annihilated by them earlier in the year, but I don't think Lamar played in that game, right?
No.
Yeah, no Lamar.
Yeah,
No one played in that game.
Yeah.
Both physically, a lot of guys didn't play, and then they also didn't show up for the game
Right.
as well.
Half the defense seemed to be on injured reserve for half the season. So I thought all the Ravens needed to do was to get in, and then just give the ball to Travis Henry. I was even surprised in that last series in Pittsburgh last week that they were throwing more than I thought he'd be ready to bust one and get him much closer. But I know they were bunching the line of scrimmage, and maybe they felt the better thing to do was to try to throw it. I thought they had a chance to score a touchdown there, and should have been a little more aggressive trying to do that than trusting a rookie kicker. But again, if they had gotten in, I think they could have done some business in the playoffs this year, as long as everybody was healthy. Lamar never looked healthy to me coming back. He just seemed to have lost his burst, and I didn't think that he was looking to run like he had, during those years that made him so dangerous. But listen, they have now the most attractive opening in the league. I'm interested to see, is it going to be like a guy like Cliff Kingsbury who can, be creative with Lamar before it seems that Kingsbury can last 2-3 years before he wears out his welcome wherever he is. But, maybe he can get Lamar to that next level.
I mean, time will tell. It's a coveted job, no doubt about it. And it's going to be interesting. The Ravens haven't been in this position in 18 years. 18 years ago, they chose a head coach that people probably didn't expect. And maybe that'll be the case here in Baltimore. But it sounds like in New York, Gary, it's a pretty good idea of the idea or the candidates that the Giants do want. And time will tell then next week of when things start to heat up, where that direction will go. Before we let you go, Gary, where else can people find you and everything else that's going on with you, and including some of your publications?
Yeah, I do a radio show on ESPN here in New York on Saturday afternoons. Next couple of weeks, I'll be on from 4 to 7. Then after that, through Super Bowl at noon, which is my usual time. And people, in your area who'd like to listen to it, you just download the ESPN New York app. And I have an interview tomorrow at 6 o'clock with Matt Burke, who you guys are familiar with in Baltimore.
Yeah.
I taped it this afternoon. Apparently, he's got like 8 kids, and Saturday afternoons are impossible. So we taped it this afternoon, and he was very insightful about what it's like to play for John Harbaugh, and kind of related it to how he would do in the New York market. Then I'm on Twitter, and I've been busy writing books. So, and I'm actually teaching a class at Syracuse next semester, my alma mater. So I'm excited about doing that.
So you're staying busy, is what you're saying?
Yeah, a little bit bored. I mean, if it's the summer, if we had weather like San Diego, I can easily be happily retired. But what are you going to do when it's 15 or 35 degrees outside in the middle of January? I just as soon stay busy than freeze my behind off. So.
You could, but yeah, I think San Diego weather is a little bit more appealing, unless you're a winter guy. But I'll be honest, man, that's too damn cold for me. It gets down too much. I don't know about that. But Gary, I appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time. I'm really curious to see what's next for the New York Giants. Just like we're going to see what's going to happen here for the Baltimore Ravens.